Okay. The format for this meeting is a 10-minute speaker, our secretary's announcements, a coffee and snack break, and our main speaker. Our first speaker tonight is Brad.
Brad, alcoholic. My sobriety date, well, I celebrated 1 year of sobriety yesterday. I don't know whose idea it was for me to speak tonight, but full disclaimer, I had a time a long time ago. I loved my sobriety. Oh yeah, I want to thank my friends for participating with me too and supporting me. I appreciate that. Anyway, my sobriety was awesome years ago. I could have gone the rest of my life sober. I was sober up in Ventura. We had an awesome crew. We did everything together, camping and sailing and screwing around and meetings and all the stuff. And I made a couple of mistakes. I won't get into all that tonight, and gave that sobriety away. I survived. I was married. I have a child, a daughter, who's amazing. But prior to COVID, my life was bordering on unmanageability when the daughter would go back to her mom's and I was left looking at my four walls. And I tried to get reconnected in the rooms. I struck out. I made a couple of friends at a meeting on the west side. I live up by the marina in LA. I made a couple of friends. I tried a bunch of meetings. I could almost get 90 days with a really bad attitude. Was not happy about it. So coming back was very, very difficult. And then COVID hit. And so I went to my desk and logged into a Zoom meeting, and that was, in my opinion, idiotic. I could not wrap my head around it. I could not engage, and probably tried 2 or 3 meetings like that, and made a conscious decision to drink COVID away. The kid was home doing her schoolwork, freaking every craft under the sun. I had some work. I could do that, drinking beer, and that was my coping mechanism. I was offended that I was not allowed to leave my house. I'm like from here, you know, I'm from this country. Why are you telling me I can't leave my house? And that hurt my soul. I could say that looking back. I'm not speaking politically. It offended me that I was not able to do what I wanted. And I drank at it. I'm always calorie conscious, so I stuck to Michelob Ultralights. They're only 98 calories each, and white wine, which is good for your cardiovascular system, from what I understand. But that became a project. In order to actually get drunk on Michelob Ultralights, apparently you need about 40 of them a day. That was a lot of work, lugging them up the stairs, falling up the stairs, and anyway, so that went on. January of 21, Saturday morning, I woke up, came to, whatever you want to call it, and I was restless, irritable, and discontent. And so I had a solo cup of my white wine, and that normally would take the edge off, and it didn't. And so I had a second solo cup of my white wine, and I still was feeling tense. So I've got 3 brothers. We're incredibly tight. I'm the oldest of 4, and 2 of them are ministers, and one he likes to drink like I do. He's better at it though. So I called him up. I said, dude, I'm shaking. This is unusual for me. And I'm already on my second solo cup of white wine. And it was, 9 a.m. And he's like, I could hear that he didn't have a great answer, but his response was, well, obviously you need to quit drinking coffee. Damn it, that was it. So I quit drinking coffee, turned to green tea. Shaking didn't quit. So, I switched to vodka. That was a short-lived story. There was an emergency room visit, a little bit of blood. My brothers are all up north in Oregon. They started coming down on a regular basis. There was a detox that was ridiculous. I was higher coming out of that place than I was going in, all the medication they gave me. And so we leveled out for a little while, and my drunk brother, who I really hope isn't watching this, says, one night we were both hammered, and we're on the phone, and he says, hey, listen, we need you in meetings. They remembered when I was sober before, and life was good. And he said, we need you in meetings. And I said, you know what, I can do that. For you guys, I can go to meetings. He said, you don't have to get sober, you don't have to quit drinking, but just go to meetings. I said, okay. So I called central office. This guy answered the phone. He was a prick. I'm a prick when I'm drinking, so it was a match made in heaven. And I started following him to some meetings. He was plugged in. He got me to a bunch of meetings of a particular group. And I'm not sure they appreciated me drunk at the meetings. I was quiet. I was well behaved, got coffee. But I went to meetings drunk for a few months, and I did not think this was going to work for me again. I knew what I got the first time was a miracle, and to get it a second time, I didn't think I could be so lucky. And eventually, I weaned myself down, and one night decided to finish what was in the fridge and call it good. And that was literally 366 days ago, October 6th. So I want to say to the newcomers, I am not the poster child for AA. The only thing I've done right, and I could relate to this as a newcomer, is don't drink between the meetings. And the other thing I did right is I found 6-7 meetings to go to a week, and I got commitments at most of them. I'm accountable to a whole crew of people at a whole bunch of different meetings. If I don't show up, I get a text or a call, Brad, are you dead? Why weren't you there? Whatever. So there's a lot of stuff that's thrown at you when you're new as far as what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, and not drinking between the meetings helps significantly. And then going to lots of meetings, and the commitments help dramatically. And I've actually used that in other areas of my life. With groups I've joined, I get a commitment and end up getting to meet people quickly. I'm down to 1 minute. I'm out of good things to say. Thank you.
Okay. Let's say the serenity prayer all together.
Okay.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Okay, now our main speaker will share his or her experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming Julie from Westchester.
Hi, everyone. My name's Julie, and I am an alcoholic. Hi, Julie. And it's good to be here tonight with all of you. There's plenty of old friends all around the room and new friends. And, you know, back when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I really didn't care about having friends. Really didn't care about any of you. And I absolutely did not want to be sober. So, you know, it's a wonderful thing that I have a sobriety date of November 16th, 1998. I have not found it necessary to drink or use since that day, even though there's been plenty of stuff that's come up that has made me want to grab that can of Coors Light. That was my favorite drink. We all have a drink of choice. Silver Bullet. I got drunk off of light beer. I don't know about you, Brad, but I did carry a couple 12 packs around, you know, daily. But I truly am grateful to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I hope that all of you really embrace this program. It has given me back a life that I've been able to participate in without being a nasty son of a gun. And that was my MO before. I didn't really get along with too many people because I just didn't care enough to make friends. You know, I had my stuff that I did, but overall, the most important thing for me to do from, you know, probably about the age of 16 till I got sober at 34 was smoke a lot of weed, snort a lot of cocaine. It was the 80s and 90s, and drink Coors Light. So, you know, it was a daily routine for me, and it lasted a long time, and I never gave up on that. I just kept going and going and going. And, you know, for me, it started out as just, I mean, what normal 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old does that? But that's what I was doing at a very young age, daily. And, you know, my mom and dad didn't really look too kindly on that. And when I was graduated from high school, they did ask me to move out with your drug-dealing boyfriend. So, of course, I moved out, married him, and we had 3 kids. And, you know, that set the cycle of my life. You know, not that I was offended that they kicked me out, but I just didn't even care enough. You know, I didn't show up for family functions. I didn't do anything because what was more important was, you know, if I didn't have to go in to work the next day, then, you know, then we'd get an 8-ball, you know, stuff like that. And so I would not go to Easter or Thanksgiving or Christmas because, you know, it was a 3-day holiday or whatever it was. And that's just not being a very good family member. So for me, you know, growing up in Westchester, I have 3 sisters, and it was a very normal family life. And drinking and using was something that was around in my family. My mom didn't really drink, but, you know, my dad liked to drink little Coors, and he was a man's man. He owned an auto parts store, and we did a lot of trips to the Colorado River. My dad was a boat racer, so we raced a lot of boats and did all kinds of stuff. So I was in that element from the age of like 7 till I was 16 or so, you know, just seeing that kind of stuff going on. There was a lot of drugs around. Not that I did it back then, but I saw all that. And, you know, there came that time for me to start doing it in junior high, and that's just what I did, and I ran with it. Like I said, you know, at 17, 18, 19, I had moved out, and it wasn't the easiest thing for me to do. I was not really a college student, and I was not really career orientated. But my mom had said to me, why don't you go over to this shop that she used to get her stuff custom framed at. She said, the guy needs some help. Maybe you can work for him. So I started working for the man. I eventually bought the business, and I ran that business for 30 years through all of my drinking and using. I'm surprised I never lost that business. But, it gave me an avenue to do whatever the hell I wanted. I had no boss, had plenty of money coming in. I could make my own hours if I wanted to. And there came a point to where I wanted to make my own hours. For the first 15, 20 years, of course I kept regular business hours because my drinking hadn't gotten too bad. But at the end of my drinking, I could not open that shop on time. And if anyone said anything to me when I strolled in at 11:30 or 12, like, where were you? And our hours were 10 to 6. You think you'd get there by 10. No, I couldn't get there by 10 if I didn't want to. I would just make some lame excuse up to them, or it was just ridiculous what I would do. And finally, one time, a guy, really got mad at me. And he points to the sign. He says, your business hours state that you are supposed to be here. And I looked at that sign. I ripped it off the wall, threw it in the trash, and had business cards printed that said hours subject to change. That was my idea. And I ran with that for another 2-3 years. People were like, when are you going to be there? I said, just call first. Don't know when I'm going to be here. Now, that's not normal behavior. But that's, what the alcoholic can think of to not hear all that slack anymore. What my drinking was doing in the end was fine to drink day and night at home, but I was starting to get a little bored with that. I'd been doing it for 17 years, so I figured I'd try a little bar drinking. Now, at that time, I'd already had 3 kids. Actually, I had 2. And I never should have been in those bars of Playa del Rey, ever. I don't know if anyone is from Playa del Rey, but I drank at every single one of them. I got 86 from a couple, and I had a very bad reputation. And that was my hometown. So everyone knew me. And I should just never have done that. But, we all have to hit our bottom in some way, and that was my bottom. The casual, consistent drug and alcohol use that I was doing at home in front of my children wasn't enough, and so I figured I'd start doing a little bit more. And, I hit my bottom real fast, and, trouble had been starting way, way, way before that. When my first son was born, I was 26, 27 years old, and we had lived in this house up on one of the hills there, and I don't really know who was calling social service on me the first, second, third, fourth, fifth time, but people kept calling social services on me. And they'd come to the house, they'd either leave a card, they'd talk to our roommates, they'd talk to the neighbors, they'd never find me. I'd either be at work or I never talked to them. And I just kept saying, why do they keep coming here? What's going on with this? And, my roommate one time said, well, you better watch out, man. With what you and Monty have been doing your whole lives, you can get in trouble with this, and you guys have kids now. I just never took it seriously. And when I was pregnant with my 3rd son, I had already, had many car accidents, many times pulled over by the police. Never did I really get in any kind of trouble for what I did. I'd always find a way to get myself out of the trouble that I got myself in from someone that I knew. I had this very weird situation once where it's a little hit and run kind of thing down at the shack, and kind of clipped this person's bumper as I was backing out, and I decided I got to get out of here. Well, everyone at the shack said she lives up the street. So by the time the cops got there, I was passed out, and I can't remember, there's a couple people there because we always had hanger-oners. So there was someone there that, got me sobered up to stand out and talk to them, and they asked me what happened. And I just said, well, I didn't realize what happened. They said, well, we're going to write you a ticket, but this is actually a hit and run. And I started up with, I have insurance, don't you know who I am, blah, blah, blah. And they said, you're going to have to go to court for this. When I went to court, one of my customers was a DA for the city of Inglewood. I had him pull some favors for me so I wouldn't get in any kind of trouble. And, that kind of stuff was something that I did over and over and over and over. I was never held responsible for any of my actions. And it just allowed me to drink and use and embarrass myself and embarrass my family. The kids at school, it's only kindergarten for my first son, and I think it was about the first month of school, and I decided I needed to go on a field trip because I'm a good mother, volunteer. And, it's early in the morning. I had a late night because that's just usually what happens. So I put a couple beers in the pocket of my coat and opened them up mid-field trip. Somewhere behind a tree or something. Parents smelled it or saw me or whatever, and a note was sent home. And my son Tommy says, Mom, there's a note from the principal here. And I said, well, I don't understand. What does she want? What did you do? And he said, Mom, it's because of you. So, he's 5, 6 years old. Stuff like that is happening. I'm an embarrassment. I'd crash these cars and I wouldn't fix them. So I'm driving this old, it's a 1972 Ford F-150, rusted all over, because I wouldn't fix my nicer car. I'm not going to fix that car. I'm so mad about that hit and run. I don't want to drive that car. I'm going to drive this. And the kids are like, it's really embarrassing, Mom. Fix your Mustang. I'm like, no. But, I just would do that kind of stuff over and over and over, not thinking of who I was affecting with my poor behavior. And, like I said, the social services were coming, and, now I had this little incident at the school, and I was pregnant with my third son, and the lady came to the house and she caught me. I was there that day. And I was there that day because it's really hard. I mean, people get fired all the time, but it's really hard to get fired from your own business. And I was fired from my own business. My husband said, we just don't want you here anymore. Stay home. And a girlfriend of mine took over my job, and I wouldn't even call me a stay-at-home mother because I was far from it. And drinking and using was consistent in my life. And yes, I have 3 kids, and no, I never got sober. So I would tone down my drinking. I would hide my using, but, I would drink in front of people, and they were like offended, but I'm like, whatever. So this social worker came out, and she had asked me when she opened the refrigerator, whose beer is that in the refrigerator? And I said, well, that's mine. Why would you say, you think I'd lie, but, I dare you. And, she talked to me for a long time. She looked around the house. She noted that there was just a few things that she didn't like. Like in our dining room, we had this paneling, and we didn't like the paneling, but we never fixed the paneling, and we let our kids draw on the 2x4s, because there was, open walls. And she called that vandalism. She said, you have vandalism in your house. I said, oh, no, our kids are we just let them use the crayons in there. She had these weird things. I got written up for some very interesting things that were, serious when it went in front of the judge. And, she asked me about the beer, and, I was calm, cool, and collected, and a real bitch. And she gave me an option because I claimed I was poor. I said, I can't go. I have no money. And she's like looking around. She's like, you guys, you can go. And I'm, no, I can't. I can't spend that money. And she talked about the Clare Foundation. So the Clare Foundation is on Pico in Santa Monica. And the way she described it, I'm like, well, that's a shelter. I don't need a shelter. I'll take a look at, other options if I need to. And she says, well, I suggest that you do it before your baby is born, because if you don't do something before that, I will take your 3 kids. And I ignored her and showed her the door. So when my third son was born, he was born a little early. They did test me. I tested positive for marijuana, and they took my kids that day. I couldn't believe that it happened that fast. I gave birth to my son Jimmy, and he was going to stay in the hospital a couple days. So I got out and I was taking my kids to school, and the sheriff's car was there. They put the kids in the back of the sheriff's car and took them away. Now that was September 6th, 1998, and all that did was make me more and more and more mad. I don't really think I have a violent streak, but I get kind of agitated. And you'd think that I would consider, because everyone around me was, I had a few friends that are sober, not many. You'd think that I would try to do something about my drinking, but I hadn't really heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, we've all heard of it, but I absolutely was not going to go. I didn't know anyone that was going. And it was a very hard pill for me to swallow, so I drank my way through the next 2 weeks. My youngest son was in the hospital. My 2 older kids were taken away and put in foster care. It's not that traumatic. They just went to my mom and dad's. But they were gone. And I was banned from the school, and all kinds of stuff was happening, because belligerence is just a good word to describe my attitude in those days. And, when I got to the point of 2 weeks into the kids being gone, and I was drunk every day, they came a point where, the posse came in and they found the beer I had hidden everywhere and tried to get me to consider to go somewhere. So they're calling Betty Ford and all kinds of places to somehow just get me out of that house. And, I still didn't really want to go, but they bribed me. They bought me a bottle of vodka and gave me a couple of tall boys, cans of Coors Light, of course, put me in the car, took me to St. John's, and I entered my 28-day rehab facility. And everyone was so nice, except me. And, I was there. They gave me a big book. They gave me a 12 and 12, each on the nightstand. I had a roommate that cried the whole time. I met some wonderful people that were inmates with me, or whatever we would be called, patients. And I just didn't want what anyone had. I was not going to do this. I really felt that the judge would look kindly on me, because I went to that nice rehab facility, and it was a 28-day program, and this is what I needed to do. And when I went in front of the judge again, he didn't care about that. He didn't care that I walked in there with 28 days of sobriety. He sentenced me to a year of outpatient, a year of therapy, parenting classes, and one other thing, random drug testing for 2 years. And I just couldn't believe it, because, I thought I was going to get away with this. I thought for sure I'd be able to get the kids back, and I was going to be right back on. My game was going to go right back on. And that drug testing thing really threw me for a loop. I'm like, shoot, I don't know how I'm going to get away with this. So it really pissed me off, so I drank on day 29. That's the kind of alcoholic I am. I was straight back down to the shack. It was a afternoon of belligerence. I was dragged away again down to St. John's. The police had to be called. I had to be strapped down, shot up with something, and sent up to the 3rd floor or 7th floor, whatever it was, there to the psych ward. They put me on a 72-hour hold, and I couldn't believe it had come to that. I'm still just thinking, I'm thinking. I'm still just thinking. And they gave me a couple options. I can go to craft hour, We were making leather purses. I could stay for my 72 hours. They would give me 1 cigarette a day. And I can go talk to my therapist and head on down to the awaiting car with Sister Ada inside and go to Women in Recovery and a sober living that they had suggested that I go to. And of course, I hopped in Ada's car, went to the sober living over in Venice, only because I knew that I'd be able to get away with all kinds of stuff there. This is my hometown. I know Venice. I don't really know Santa Monica, but I know Venice, Playa del Rey, Marina del Rey. There's bars there, too. There's ways. I know liquor stores. If I can get $10, I know what I'm going to do. And, I drank my way through a little sober living, couple weeks there, and didn't really get caught, or they just chose to ignore me because everyone was kind of scared of me. And there came that fateful day. And it was a Sunday, and I was very drunk by this time. And it was the 7 o'clock meditation meeting, and everyone was coming, all of Ada's friends from the Palisades, and I had been meeting them, and there I was, passed out flat on the front lawn. And right across from there is the McDonald's. I'm looking up at the Golden Arches thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? And they scooped me up and put me in a car and took me to the Clare Foundation. And that was November 15th, so my sobriety date's the next day, because I woke up and I was on a cot. And there was 3 other cots. And there were some women in there that I never thought I'd ever be roommates with. And I said, oh, I just can't have this. So I was basically scared sober, But I knew, because I had heard enough. I had been going to meetings at Sister Ada's house. I had heard the women come in from the panels. In the 28 days I was in St. John's Hospital, I had those books. And I just kind of had to, I don't want to say embrace the program, but I had to start looking at what this program could offer me. So I looked at this program could offer me. I had a 2-year plan because I was court ordered for 2 years. I was going to be drug tested for 2 years. And my plan, or my story, was I got narked on and leave me alone. And, I stayed sober, worked the program to the best of my ability. I got a sponsor. She had me going to regular meetings on regular meeting nights. I had my first posse of friends back then. I did a lot of meetings in West LA, Santa Monica, because that's where my rehab facility and sober livings were. So I kind of stuck with those people. Now, they were still a little wary of me. I wasn't drinking, I wasn't using, I was trying to the best of my ability to do what I needed to do. The best thing they liked about me was I had a car. And, it's been said before, but the most spiritual thing you can do is get that newcomer in the car. So I drove a lot of people to meetings for the first couple years of my sobriety, and that was helping me because all of a sudden, the kids came back. They came back after 5 months. It was not real traumatic. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. So when I was finally done with the court-ordered stuff, I had already made friends with all of you. I had already started to change. So the biggest part of Alcoholics Anonymous for me is to embrace others. I didn't want to hug you, and I didn't want you to hug me. I didn't want to share anything in meetings that was too personal, but I had to, because then I'd get feedback from you. And everyone has always been so welcoming to me. I have a lot of friends that I've known from women's meetings in Westchester. They said, yeah, those first 5 to 10 years were really rough. We didn't know what to expect. And, I stayed sober and I did what I needed to do. I worked the steps. Took a lot of women to meetings. That's the best I can do. I've had a couple sponsors, and they always try to put me in Al-Anon because I do have an ex-husband that still drinks. I have Al-Anon stuff, but there came a point to where my Al-Anon sponsor has asking me, what are you doing to give back to AA? Well, what is your service commitment? I said, well, I bring the cookies. I was famous for that. Cookie commitment was about the best I could do, and I did it all around. I bring cookies. That's it. And she said, no, but what are you doing to practice the 12th step? And I said, that is service. And they said, no, what we do here is we help others. I said, well, I give girls rides to meetings. And, I had Ada calling me and giving me some suggestions because her house had closed by then. And there was a sober living called Vision House over and it was really far from where I lived. It was very inconvenient for me to get there. But Norma kept calling me and saying, can you take the girls to the meeting? Can you bring them to Martyrs? Can you take them to the meditation meeting? So I'd find myself traipsing from Westchester over to Torrance and picking up these girls, all these young girls. Finally, they all started wanting me to be their sponsor, and I'm like, oh, I don't do that. Well, I don't. But a couple of the girls and I just, muddled our way through the big book, and the couple girls came to be a handful of girls, and by the time I was 15, 16 years sober, I probably had about 15 sponsees. So things change if you open up and embrace this program. And, we'd all come here, have a couple rows of us, we'd all go to different meetings over in the Palisades and just certain places that we like to go as a group. So one of the best things that, I want to talk about in the end is, find your posse. We have a posse. We all move to the front. We will move back to our seats in the back come next week. But it's the most important thing for me is to be able to help someone. It doesn't matter if they're 40 years sober or under a year or whatever it is. We just need to all stick together. And sticking together means we could be accountable to each other. And for me, it's been very helpful because when the global pandemic hit, it really pissed me off too. I just how can this be? All my meetings stopped. And that was my big structure. I had meetings, I had stuff I was doing, I had a routine. And, I had lost my mom and dad right before the pandemic. Was a little sad and a little tragic at the same time. And all of a sudden I was left on my own because I had divorced my husband quite a few years ago. We got divorced. I think he started drinking at we were both about 5 or 6 years sober. Kids were in Little League Baseball. It was all-stars. We were all at Tower Pizza. Might as well pour the beer in your mug. And 2 or 3 of the kids said, oh, Monty's drinking beer. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So, I knew what I was going to do. I divorced him. And I needed to stay sober. It was most important. By the time I was 5, 6, 7 years sober, it was important to me to stay here with all of you. Because my kids they know their mom's a little crazy, but I'm less crazy if I'm hanging out with all of you. And it was very important for my boys to see the structure that I had and to give them comfort. Because drinking and using in the family can be very traumatic. My older son is he's college educated. That's what happens when you get sober. You put him through college instead of ignoring him. And he's a school teacher up near Yosemite. My younger son is still in college. He's doing a little golf degree. He wants to be a pro golfer or a pro, work in the pro shop. I don't know what it is. He's doing something with golf. But they're very proud of me. And, this disease can affect your kids. And I do have, my middle son is in jail. And he's been in jail for almost a year. We've had a series in the last 3 years of many episodes of psychosis. It's all due to marijuana use, and he needs to be in here with all of you. He needs to sit with his peers. But he didn't want to sit with his peers because he's seen that big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's seen me pounding that big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I've had to recognize myself recently that it's time for me to take a few steps back and get to that Al-Anon meeting. I raised my hand. and to let him go. You know, I'm powerless over alcohol. I'm powerless over people, places, and things. I found that out in step 1. In step 2, I came to believe, so I have to believe. I believe when I see all of you here. I have to believe that it can happen for anyone. It happened for me, and I absolutely didn't want it. My will is absolutely the strongest thing that is known to man or woman, so turning that over is going to be a little tricky. But, you know, I've really been trying to do that, and like you said, we don't take ourselves too seriously. You know, I've had quite a few years recently where I've taken myself way too seriously because I can't fix someone, and I can't fix my son. And it's been the most difficult thing I've ever done, and I have to recognize that God has a plan, because God's plan got me here. God's plan has gotten all of you here, and it's one of those things that if I have enough faith, if I could get myself out of the way, I believe that he has a chance, just like we all have a chance. So thank you for letting me share. I owe my life to Alcoholics Anonymous.